Television 5.
From Washington, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. Given the facts of an explosion in world population growth, abortion is an especially electric and infinitely complex issue. In discussing abortion, the Supreme Court has said that if doctors, philosophers, and theologians could not agree on when a life begins, then it could hardly speculate itself. Today, a group of legislators, a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee, began its attempt to define life, and there was trouble. Bruce Morton covered it.
The chairman made a promise
that when we have completed this process, that every person can say, whatever side they came down on this issue, the hearings were fair, extensive, and exhaustive.
There were many skeptics. Planned Parenthood, the American Civil Liberties Union, and the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology all complained they weren't allowed to testify. Conservative Orrin Hatch said his subcommittee had reservations about the hearings and would not co-sponsor them. Hatch also said the bill, which says human life begins at conception, might be unconstitutional.
Although I disbelieve in indiscriminate abortion in this country, I believe that the Constitution is the most important political document in the world.
A congressional research study requested by Democrat Max Baucus agrees the bill may well be unconstitutional. And Baucus, the ranking minority member on the subcommittee, sent East a letter objecting to the procedures and the witness list.
Personal genetic code is...
Could we have order? Could we have order, please?
If that weren't enough, a group called the Women's Liberation ZAP Action Brigade twice interrupted the hearing.
First of all, that conception is a definable concept.
Only the witnesses went as programmed, all agreeing that the newly fertilized egg, it looks like this, is a person.
All life, including human life, begins at the moment of conception.
Individual human life begins at conception.
Human life, personhood, begins at the point of conception.
But the Supreme Court has already ruled that a fetus is not a person. And there are constitutional questions about the bill's other provision, which would bar federal courts, except the Supreme Court, from intervening in abortion cases. So there will be more hearings, more arguments. Short tempers will get shorter. You've opened this can of worms, one witness told East. Now you have to deal with it. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
In Massachusetts, a law went into effect today that requires an unmarried woman under 18 to have the written consent of both parents or that of a judge before she can legally obtain an abortion. No other state has such a law. Another major abortion issue, the government's controversial role in detection of birth defects, will be reported in depth later in this broadcast. The Labor Department reported today that the nation's cost of living in March rose at the lowest rate since last summer, due mainly to a leveling off in energy prices. The department said the Consumer Price Index was up 0.6% last month for a seasonally adjusted annual inflation rate of 7.5%. In February, the Consumer Price Index jumped at an annual rate of 12.1%. Behind all those inflation figures, as Ray Brady reports, there is a balm for the elderly that's a headache to some critics.
There's a time bomb ticking away in today's figures, one that's set to go off in July. That's when these numbers will translate into a major increase in Social Security payments to the elderly and other beneficiaries.
That's because payments to the elderly have been indexed since 1975. That means payments go up every time there is even a slight rise in the cost of living from the first quarter of one year to the first quarter of the next. Today's figures for that period show the cost of living up 11.2%. Result, starting in July, the typical Social Security check will go up $37, from $337 a month to $374. A boost that will mean an increase in total Social Security spending of more than $1 billion a month. Critics say this system favors the elderly at the expense of Americans who are still working. With the quarterly inflation rate at 11.2%, the elderly get checks that keep up. But the salaries of Americans who are paying into that system have not. Wages have gone up only an estimated 9.7%.
It's an inequity. It's almost like the unfairness of the war in Vietnam that finally tore the country apart. Economically, this is going to tear the economy apart because you're putting Social Security recipients, government employees, civil service workers, retired senators in a special class. It's wrong. We don't have the money to afford it.
Hollings wants Congress to pass a bill that would limit Social Security payments in years when wages don't keep up with inflation. And that has many elderly groups mad. They say their checks don't keep up with their costs now.
Food at home, fuel and utilities, and medical care. The elderly spend disproportionately larger shares of their family budgets on these things, and these things have been going up at rates dramatically in excess of the aggregate rate of inflation.
The elderly make up 17% of the nation's voters, so it seems unlikely that even an administration committed to cuts in spending will move to change a formula that in 1 year alone will increase Social Security spending by an estimated $15 billion in a system that's already in financial trouble. For the rest of us, the moderating inflation trend also shows up in the Reagan Index, the CBS News measure of inflation since Ronald Reagan became president. It shows that what cost $1 in January now costs slightly less than $1.02. Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
Against the good news in last month's inflation rate, you should balance a new Department of Energy projection saying gasoline prices could go up from 10 to 39 cents a gallon by late this year. First quarter reports from 3 more big oil companies today reflected consumer fuel conservation. Exxon profits fell 17% from the first quarter of 1980. Gulf's profits dropped 22%. And Occidental Petroleum, their earnings were down almost 7%. The stock market was mixed today.
Take the world's best ovenware, Corningware, bonded with a remarkable metal bottom, and you've created new range toppers by Corning. Range toppers heat evenly. Their handles can't come loose, and they clean beautifully. New range toppers, part metal, part Corningware. All you need for superb range top performance.
When we eat our shredded wheat, we never leave them whole. We mash them up and bash them up, we smash them in the bowl. We crush them, break them, squash them, squeeze them, twist them in our fist. We grind them into tiny, tasty bits.
Nabisco shredded wheat, big or little, made of 100% natural whole wheat, with no added sugar, no added salt.
They feel so good, they taste so good for breakfast. We love that whole wheat flavor, we love that whole wheat crunch.
Nabisco shredded wheats, the good taste of 100% whole wheat with no added sugar.
Funeral services were held today for 15-year-old Joseph Bell, the 24th victim in Atlanta's child slayings. And as Bruce Hall reports, a woman reportedly is now telling authorities about a man she links to some of the crimes.
A variety of sources say that a Miami woman now claims that she was told about several of the Atlanta killings before they occurred. The woman, who has not been publicly identified, was the source Roy Innes referred to yesterday when he announced that he had discovered the link that would break the Atlanta murders case. She said the killer is a former boyfriend who hates children. She said she did not believe his stories about the killings until he told her that 21-year-old Eddie Duncan and 21-year-old Larry Rogers would be killed next. A few days later, Duncan and Rogers were killed. She also claims that the killer, who is black and used to live in Miami, says that he delivered some of the children to whites to be killed. Authorities will not say whether they believe the woman, but they are pursuing the story vigorously. However, the mother of one of the slain black children says that she has been shown the photograph of the man the Miami woman claims is the murderer. Annie Hill says she recognized the man.
He been in this neighborhood walking. And because of this one thing, cause I done see them more in one time. Well, when I see him, you know, he'd be walking up, you know, down the sidewalk, and he attended, you know, the boys club, and he was at the A&P store.
Police sources say the theory that many of the youngsters were recruited by homosexuals for sexual favors is the strongest motive investigators now have for the killings. Other officers say they're investigating a report that Michael McIntosh, the 23-year-old victim found in the river earlier this week, may have been involved in recruiting children for homosexuals. The head of the Atlanta office of the FBI, John Glover, and Public Safety Commissioner Lee Brown met this afternoon for 2.5 hours with Roy Innes. Afterward, Brown would only say they're continuing to follow the leads. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Atlanta.
At Fort Benning, Georgia, authorities are checking what they call the hottest lead we've had yet in the string of slayings of black males in the Buffalo, New York area. Their investigation reportedly centers on a white soldier who's been charged with attempted murder of a black soldier after a stabbing incident in the barracks. Officials say records indicate the white soldier enlisted in November after 4 black males in the Buffalo area had been shot to death earlier in the fall.
There are many medications for acid indigestion or heartburn relief. Which one is right for you? For years, Maalox has been recommended most by doctors. Now, the antacid ingredients in here, plus an extra ingredient, are in Maalox Plus tablets. Really pleasant tasting and effective. And Maalox Plus tablets also come in this handy pocket pack that keeps them fresh and sanitary. Maalox Plus for acid indigestion or heartburn relief. But don't just take my word for it. Try Maalox Plus tablets. You'll find you can't do better.
I got my John Deere lawn and garden tractor the same year my son Eddie was born. They sort of grew up together. And I'll tell you, over the years, I've had more problems with Eddie than I've ever had with that tractor. John Deere builds them tough and solid. And your John Deere dealer is a man you can count on to keep them running year after year. Oh, you may pay a little more for a John Deere, but they'll last. I'm not so sure about Eddie.
The Reagan administration today vowed to go ahead with its proposed sale of advanced technology radar surveillance planes to Saudi Arabia, but it is trying to cushion the controversy with claims that the aircraft, called AWACS, are strictly defensive and pose no threat to Israel. From the State Department, Robert Pierpoint has more.
It became clear today that the Reagan administration intends to turn operational control of those 5 AWACS over to Saudi Arabia, despite mounting objections from Israel and Israel's American supporters. Administration officials say that in 1985, 440 American technicians will be sent to Saudi Arabia to train the Saudis and maintain the AWACS, 410 of them civilians and 30 from the U.S. Air Force. A few may stay on through the life of the planes, but not to keep control of them. That issue was raised by Jewish leaders at a meeting this morning with Defense Secretary Weinberger and Secretary of State Hay.
The sale is an absolute sale, and that indeed they will eventually be in the hands of the Saudis totally. That seems to be the situation.
Saudi Arabia's oil minister, speaking in New York today, insisted that the AWACS would be directed not against Israel, but against communist-sponsored aggression.
It is in your interest to give the Saudis these sophisticated instruments so that we can monitor any movements of those who will come and attack Saudi Arabia.
But the administration's drive to sell the Saudis those planes may have received a serious setback today from former CIA Director Stansfield Turner, who went public with his belief that Saudi Arabia does not need AWACS.
The Saudis have a much different military problem than that which AWACS can help. And trying to absorb AWACS will divert their attention, will divert so much of their military effort away from insurrection, rebellion, guerrilla warfare, small attacks from their neighbors, that I think it will hurt them in the long run.
President Reagan discussed the AWACS issue with Senate Majority Leader Howard Baker today. Baker has indicated the Saudi arms package is in deep trouble on Capitol Hill. Other sources tell CBS News that some senators are still looking for a way to lease the Saudis those planes or otherwise keep them under U.S. control. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News at the State Department.
Rioting spread in Northern Ireland today, the 9th straight day of violence. In addition to continued trouble in Belfast and Londonderry, there were clashes in at least 3 other cities between British troops and Roman Catholic youths. Near the city of Armagh, a former militiaman of the Protestant Ulster Defence Regiment was shot and killed while at work. The rioting was sparked by the hunger strike of jailed rebel terrorist Bobby Sands, who is reported very near death in Belfast's Maze prison. There's a continuing feeling in Japan that the United States so far has told somewhat less than the whole truth about that collision of an American submarine and a Japanese freighter 2 weeks ago. Bruce Dunning reports from Tokyo.
U.S. Navy officers met with surviving crew members from the Nisho Maru amid continuing harsh criticism of the American handling of the incident. The survivors insist that both the submarine George Washington and a Navy patrol plane overhead could easily have seen that the freighter was in trouble. The collision, they said, knocked out the freighter's power, so it was impossible to send out an SOS. It was also impossible, they say, for the freighter to have sailed away as the Navy claims. One official report says the submarine, now at its home port in Guam, surfaced immediately and its crew reported seeing the ship moving away. But another government report, a contradictory one, say the Japanese, is that visibility was so poor that the American crew claimed to have quickly lost sight of the Nisho Maru. Such contradictions and the crew's version of the event are increasing Japanese mistrust of U.S. willingness to disclose just what happened. Almost 2 weeks after the collision, the bodies of the missing captain and the first mate were found at sea, fueling Japanese unhappiness over what is widely described here as U.S. Navy callousness in ignoring seamen in distress. Bruce Dunning, CBS News, Tokyo.
One of the most powerful hardline members of the Soviet Union's ruling Politburo, Mikhail Suslov, made a surprise visit to Warsaw today for a meeting with Polish communist leader Stanislaw Konia. This is the first trip by a Soviet policymaker to Poland since last summer's labor unrest. The trip was described by Warsaw officials as a friendly visit, but earlier this month, Suslov, the chief Soviet ideologist, warned that any deviation from communist theory could have, quote, fatal consequences. Well, Ronald Biggs, one of Britain's so-called great train robbers of 18 years ago, once again has escaped British justice. The Supreme Court of Barbados ruled today that because of an extradition treaty with London that was never ratified, Biggs could not be forced to return to Britain, where he escaped from prison in 1965. A band of mercenaries 5 weeks ago kidnapped Biggs from his exile home in Brazil and spirited him to Barbados. Said Biggs today, it's back to Brazil.
Fuel economy, value for your money. That's what you'll find in all new General Motors cars and trucks at GM dealers. You'll also find a financial institution whose only business is automotive financing. That's GMAC. You know, even when money is tight, credit is available from GMAC and at rates that make good sense. Ask a GM dealer about GMAC, the financing people from General Motors.
Polident presents Martha Ray, movie star, denture wearer.
Folks, I've used Polident for years, but now there's something that cleans my dentures even better. It's fantastic. New Extra Strength Polident. Watch it work on this tough lab stain. New Extra Strength Polident has 50% more of a special stain remover. 50% more. Gets those stains clean, even in between. So take it from a big mouth. New Polident Green gets tough stains clean with extra strength.
A federal judge in Topeka, Kansas, today ordered that a Cuban refugee who's been imprisoned for a year must be freed within 24 hours on the grounds that his human rights are being violated. This ruling is expected to affect the status of 1,500 other boat lift refugees who were jailed on allegations by U.S. officials that they were convicted criminals in Cuba. The government plans to ask for a stay of that ruling. Well, the lights were dimmed in the New York courtroom today as Senator Harrison Williams watched a rerun of tapes recorded during the FBI's so-called Abscam investigation. The senator, as Chris Kelly reports, was not pleased about what he saw.
The jury was confronted with the question of how to interpret the videotape evidence, whether to believe Senator Harrison Williams when he was secretly recorded by FBI agents, or whether to believe him now. So the defense replayed a tape in which Williams brags about his political connections to a phony sheikh and how he can get government contracts for a mine deal.
That's why you mentioned the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. You know, we're very close, personal friends. And of course, with the Secretary of State of Defense, we're neighbors. And so we're close.
But in his explanation today, Williams said he was only trying to impress the sheikh. It gave me that aura of importance, he said. Even if I was extreme and boasting, that would not abuse my office. But Williams confessed it might make me look like a dope. The tape rolled again, Williams emphasizing his influence.
But you can be assured that we have a relationship that will make all of that possible. That's all I want to tell you.
And Williams explained that meant nothing in particular, just an obvious exaggeration. Williams also testified, "I might go along with a lot of conversation, but I would never do anything or say anything I knew was wrong." Williams admitted today he was embarrassed to see himself on the tapes. "It makes me," he said, "uncomfortable." Chris Kelly, CBS News, Brooklyn, New York.
President Reagan plans to make his first public appearance since he was shot next Tuesday night to push for his economic program before a joint session of Congress. CBS News will broadcast the second and concluding part of a special report on the president's first 3 months tonight at 11:30, 10:30 Central Time.
IBM has a big surprise for you, our executive copier.
It has excellent copy quality.
It's extremely reliable and comes with IBM service.
Easy to use.
And it's very, very, very small. The IBM Executive Copier.
Mom, he's putting A1 steak sauce on his hamburger.
My dear nephew, what is hamburger? Chopped ham? No, it's chopped steak. And what's better on steak than A1? A1 makes hamburgers taste like steak burgers. Take a bite. A1's herbs and spices blend with the meat's natural juices.
Delicious.
Sure.
It's really juicy and tastier. Best hamburger you'll ever have. Because it's a steak burger.
Hey, your uncle's steak burger.
A1 makes hamburgers taste like steak burgers.
Correspondent Susan Spencer has a report now dealing with a nightmare that could happen to any woman at one time of her life, the possibility that her child will be born with a crippling defect. Does she go ahead or consider an abortion if tests convince her that this will happen? This is a report about such a test. It's still in the experimental stage and conducted under close supervision. The report contains some pictures that are not very pleasant.
The Reagan administration has left no doubt where it stands on abortion.
I will work for you to implement a pro-life policy in the Department of Health and Human Services as well.
For anti-abortion groups now comes what may be the acid test of that promise, a controversial decision pending before the Food and Drug Administration. It involves a little-known procedure for finding before birth what are called neural tube defects, the most common major birth defect in America. Of the 3 million babies born this year, 5,000 will be affected. You will not see them laughing or cooing in the hospital nursery. Half will die at birth or soon after, victims of anencephaly, where the brain or part of it is simply missing. The other half will suffer spina bifida, where the vertebrae over the spinal cord fail to form, exposing the nerves. A New York University study found that 1 in 5 such children dies before he is a year old. Only about 15% ever walk unaided. Most are partially paralyzed and require repeated operations and constant medical attention. Kidney failure and mental retardation are common. The question before the FDA is whether to approve, with restrictions, a kit of chemicals used in a simple blood test to spot such defects.
Now, you understand that this is a screening test?
Yes.
The blood test is only the first step in a 3-stage process, but anti-abortion supporters argue that it is an unwise first step. Since there is no treatment for such defects, they say the government would be encouraging abortions.
It isn't the technology that is intrinsically evil. The technology becomes evil in the hands of the user. And in this instance, it's clearly detailed to be a search and destroy mission. Let us find those babies that are less than normal and kill them. That's the name of the game. Sorry about that.
Technically, the test is simple. It measures a substance called alpha-fetoprotein, AFP, which in affected fetuses leaks from the hole in the spinal column into the mother's bloodstream, giving her abnormally high levels.
Okay, bend your arm up.
But the blood test, which will be positive on about 50 in 1,000 women, is by no means conclusive. A second test cuts the number to around 30.
Here's the baby's head.
Phase 2, a sonogram eliminates half of them.
That's good. You're going just fine.
And finally, amniocentesis, withdrawing amniotic fluid for analysis, narrows the suspected cases to 1 or 2 per 1,000. But anti-abortion groups wonder how many women would panic and without waiting for the final results, rush out and have an unnecessary abortion.
During that staging of this thing, you have a level of anxiety that is simply profound. Put yourself in the position of this particular woman, this man, who is told you have a baby who is handicapped. And all of the upset and anxiety that creates, and now you come back a week later and they say, oh, really, we were mistaken. Your baby isn't handicapped.
So ignorance is bliss in this case.
When your odds are only 1 in 1,000, I see no reason for raising the level of anxiety.
To guard against panic abortions, the FDA proposals would require that mothers sign forms stating that they understood all phases of the tests and their implications. The tests would be done by approved doctors using approved labs. Statistics from pilot programs show that faced with the information, most women, at least those who take the test, will avoid giving birth to a handicapped child.
I'm saying only that there is a technology that is available on a voluntary basis to those couples who wish to avoid having children with sometimes catastrophic or even very severe defects. It shouldn't be a uniform recommendation. It shouldn't be mandated. It's something that is available to avoid the little we can avoid in life in terms of tragedies.
In nearly 18,000 cases screened over 5 years in the Long Island Project, 20 neural tube defects were diagnosed, all correctly, and all but one mother ended the pregnancy. No normal fetuses were aborted. Wendy Gates faced the decision while a nurse in an intensive care unit for newborns, so she knew the problems. She also strongly opposed abortion, but finally had one. The fetus had spina bifida.
I really defy a lot of mothers, no matter how much they want a child, to make a decision different from what I did. You know, a lot of people can sit back and say, I'd never have an abortion, I'd never have one. But they haven't been confronted with somebody showing you pictures of a deformed child and saying this is going to be yours. You know, and until they are in that situation, I don't think that they can really sit back and say, I wouldn't do it.
A final decision from the FDA is not expected for several months. The administration finds itself in something of an awkward position. On the one hand, there's the abortion issue. On the other, the much ballyhooed need to get rid of federal regulation. If that logic held, the FDA might release the tests with no restrictions. But considering the medical, scientific, and ethical questions involved, that's something neither side expects. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Washington.
That's our report this Thursday. Dan Rather, CBS News, reporting from Washington.
Fact, you're about to witness an act of violence. Brute force exploding, unleashing friction at its worst. Because when you start a cold engine, it's barely protected by motor oil. What can you do? Fact, use the black oil Arco Graphite, the oil with graphite, the lubricant that makes Arco Graphite reduce friction better than any other leading oil. Arco Graphite, the oil that's fact, not friction. Look for Arco Graphite's $1.80 refund offer.
Sears is playing a great season opener. Save $50 on this Craftsman Eager 1 rear bagging mower. Start with the help of a solid-state ignition. Cut with a 4.0 reserve power engine. Pay just $189.99. Or save $100 on Sears' new Bold Breed 10-horsepower lawn tractor. All new for wide-cutting, tight-turning, easy control. Now, $9.99. For a mower or tractor that really cuts the work, you can count on Sears.
From Washington, this has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. This is CBS.
A new judge takes over the Blanton trial.